Most people think arguments are won with words, better logic, better vocabulary, better speaking skills. Wrong. The best lawyers often win the argument before they even open their mouth, before the first objection, before the first question, before the first sentence. In fact, by the time the trial starts, the outcome is often already decided. And if you understand the system great lawyers use, you'll never look at debates, negotiations, or disagreements the same way again, because what they know is terrifyingly simple. Arguments aren't won with talking. They're won with psychology, structure, and positioning. I'm going to show you exactly how they do it. 4 mechanisms, the same ones used in courtrooms, negotiations, boardrooms, and political debates. By the end of this, you'll start noticing arguments being decided before anyone speaks. Let's start with the first advantage. Chapter 1. The Framing Trap. Most people think arguments are about evidence. Wrong. Arguments are about frames. A frame is the lens through which people interpret information. And once a frame is set, everything that follows gets interpreted through it. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman demonstrated this with a famous experiment. 2 groups were given the same medical statistics. Group 1 heard, "This treatment has a 90% survival rate." Group 2 heard, "This treatment has a 10% death rate." Same numbers, completely different decisions. One frame signals safety, the other signals danger. Great lawyers understand this better than anyone. They don't start with evidence. They start with the story, because once the story is accepted, the evidence becomes inevitable. Average people argue like this. Here are my facts. Here is my logic. Here is why I'm right. Good lawyers argue differently. They build a narrative first. Example, instead of saying, "My client didn't steal the money," they frame the story. "My client is a small business owner who trusted the wrong partner." Now every piece of evidence gets filtered through that narrative. Confusing bank transfers? That's betrayal. Missing money? That's manipulation. Suspicious behavior? That's fear. The story controls interpretation. Research in cognitive psychology calls this schema activation. Your brain doesn't analyze raw facts. It matches new information to existing stories. So whoever controls the story controls the argument. But here's the problem. Even if you control the story, people still resist. Humans hate changing their minds, which leads to the second advantage. Chapter 2. The Burden Shift. Most people think arguments require proving you're right. Wrong. Great lawyers know the secret is forcing the other side to prove they're right. This is called shifting the burden of proof. And it changes everything. Here's the trick. The person defending loses. The person questioning wins. Why? Because the brain processes doubt faster than certainty. Psychologist Daniel Gilbert found something interesting. Your brain automatically believes information first, then it verifies it later. Belief is automatic. Skepticism requires work. So, when great lawyers ask questions, they're not looking for answers. They're planting doubt. Example, instead of saying, "This witness is lying," they ask, "Is it possible the witness misremembered?" Tiny question, massive effect. Now the jury's brain starts searching for inconsistencies. And once doubt enters the room, it spreads. This is called the availability heuristic. When your brain notices one problem, it assumes there are more. One crack in the wall makes you question the entire structure. Great lawyers exploit this relentlessly. They rarely attack directly. They ask questions. Questions trigger curiosity. Curiosity triggers doubt. Doubt weakens confidence. Confidence is what arguments run on. Destroy confidence, and the argument collapses. But here's the thing, though. Even if you frame the narrative, even if you shift the burden of proof, you still have another problem. People trust confidence, which leads to the third advantage. Hit subscribe before you forget this one. We fix cognitive blind spots here. Chapter 3. The Authority Illusion. Most people think authority comes from credentials. Wrong. Authority comes from behavioral signals. And great lawyers broadcast authority constantly. Psychologist Amy Cuddy studied how body language affects perception. Within seconds, people decide whether someone is competent or not. Not based on arguments. Based on presence, posture, voice pace, eye contact. Your brain evolved to detect dominance instantly. Why? Because for most of human history, authority meant survival. The confident leader probably knew where the food was. The uncertain one probably got eaten. So your brain still runs the same algorithm. Confidence equals credibility. Great lawyers exploit this in subtle ways. They speak slowly. They pause. They maintain calm. Why? Because speed signals anxiety. Pauses signal control. Think about it. Who sounds more confident? Person A. Well, I think maybe the evidence suggests. Or person B. The evidence shows something very different. Same information, different perception. Research from Princeton found that listeners judge credibility within half a second of hearing a voice. Half a second. The argument hasn't even started yet, which means perception happens before logic. Great lawyers understand this. They aren't just presenting information. They're performing competence. But here's the thing though. Authority alone isn't enough. You can sound confident and still lose. Because the strongest weapon lawyers use isn't speaking, it's preparation, which brings us to the final advantage. Chapter 4. The preparation weapon. Most people prepare arguments by collecting facts. Wrong. Great lawyers prepare by predicting the opponent. There's a concept in chess called thinking 2 moves ahead. Lawyers think 20. Before trial begins, elite litigators simulate the entire argument. What will the other lawyer say? What evidence will they use? What emotional appeals will they make? Psychologists call this mental simulation. Gary Klein studied decision-making in experts like firefighters and military commanders. Experts don't analyze every option. They simulate outcomes in their head. They mentally run scenarios until one strategy works. Great lawyers do exactly this. They rehearse the opponent's argument better than the opponent does, which creates a devastating advantage. When the other side speaks, the lawyer already knows what's coming. Imagine playing chess where you already know the opponent's moves. That's what great legal preparation feels like. But it goes deeper. Elite lawyers prepare something called pre-buttals, not rebuttals. Pre-buttals. Instead of waiting for the attack, they address it before it appears. Example. If the prosecution tells you this contract looks suspicious, remember it was signed during a chaotic merger. Now when the accusation arrives, it feels predictable, weak, already answered. The brain interprets predictable attacks as less credible. This is called inoculation theory in psychology. Expose people to a weak version of an argument first, and they become resistant to the stronger version later. Exactly like a vaccine. Great lawyers vaccinate the jury against the opponent's argument before it even appears, which means when the opponent finally speaks, they're already losing. But here's the problem though. You now understand framing, burden shifting, authority signals, and strategic preparation. But most people still lose arguments for one simple reason. They talk too much. And that's exactly what destroys persuasion. Because the most powerful move in an argument isn't speaking, it's silence. That's why I made another video breaking down why the smartest negotiators talk the least and win the most. Once you understand that technique, arguments start feeling almost unfair. Watch that next.